Hello, oodles and noodles. We are returned. We have returned. We are returned. We're back to talk yet again about another lovely book. And today I'm going to finally finalize book 4 of the Superpowered series. And I'm also going to basically do a whole series review today. I mean, at the end of the day, I am going to be talking about the final book in the series, so this seems to be the pretty much perfect time to talk about the entire series as a whole and my feelings on it. But of course, I'll be focusing in at first on just year 4. And I wanted to, start off with saying that as someone who started reading this series with a lot of hesitation, because even before I began reading it, it sounded a little bit too much. I don't want to call it YA because I do enjoy YA novels as well, but it definitely sounded a little bit too much slice of life, fluffy, and it did end up being like that when I first read the series. Book 1 was lots and lots of fluff, which came, I've spoken about this before, it came a lot from it being a web novel, which is not something I was habituated to, but the series really grew on me. And now that I've finished off book 4, I'm kind of feeling unsure about how I feel about the whole endeavor. So book 4, it returned to form to some degrees, in regards to it being very much slice of lifey, much like book 1. At the same time as, unlike book 1, it finally tied together so many of the disparate plot lines that had been going along in the background throughout book 1, 2, and 3. So there was a major overarching story that basically we knew was kind of filtering in from the back. We knew that there used to be this grand, incredible hero by the name of Globe who had turned evil, turned criminal. And throughout the 3 books, we understood that there was something more going on, and this was tied into Alice, one of our main characters, and her family, specifically her mother. And we couldn't really understand what exactly had happened to really make Globe go bad. And it turns out, of course, that Globe was not the bad guy that we thought he was, that inevitably it ended up being someone else, someone close to Alice, and it honestly didn't really feel like much of a drop to me. I think that was my major issue with book 4, besides the fact that there was lots of time. This was a big book. It was a book that dragged. It took me weeks to finish just because I didn't really feel, I wasn't getting pulled in to it. There were moments, don't get me wrong, there were moments in book 4 that were really, really great. Some of the action series seasons, I don't even know what I'm trying to say. Some of the action points that happened within this book were quite well done. There were some scenes within the intramurals that were really, really well done, especially Vince's fights where he's trying to understand his own ability and how to control being someone who can actually destroy so much. But there was a lot of fluff. There was a lot of time spent just in chit-chats that did not need to happen, and quite frankly, it took away from when things dropped, when we finally got some tidbits, when we finally started to understand the story. We would have a small little bit where it's like, oh, okay, I get this now, this makes sense, and you want to find out a little bit more, but you got to wait like 6 chapters before something happens again, and that's too long. That's too long for book 4. It took almost until I was about 70%, 75% of the way through the last book of the series before stuff actually started happening. Big things. And that's quite a long time to wait for something when you're at the final book in the series. So it was a drag. It was a dragger to me. But like I said, what did happen? So the whole turnaround of Globe's story, finding out about Charles Adair, finding out about the whole Adair family, basically, and all the problems and all the crap that came from that. That was actually quite interesting. I very much enjoyed it. I enjoyed how Vince developed to a certain degree, although I did still feel a kind of lack of empathy towards him. It was hard to be emotionally connected to him. I feel that the only two people I've ever really felt very emotionally connected to in this series were Alice and Roy and Herschel, surprisingly. And even then, because of Roy's kind of flippant personality, he's not someone you can really get close to. So it's primarily just Alice. I mean, most of the relationships just in total, whether it's the friendships or especially the romantic relationships in the series, I didn't feel anything. Like Vince and Camille's relationship was just blah to me. I still don't understand what the point of it being in the series was. I didn't really feel much of anything towards Alice and Nick. They don't really have a relationship. It's just kind of weird in this limbo, and that's kind of what seems to be happening all the time. There's just these kind of vague relationships that are going on that we're supposed to kind of care about, but they're never developed to any degree. Even other characters, other students from other schools get dragged into this novel and then kind of get pulled into our final, and I want to call it an anticlimactic battle, because it really was. I did not enjoy the final battle in the series. There was too many people in it. So instead of feeling personally attached to any of the characters fighting, I didn't really care. It just seemed like a big free-for-all that wasn't really drawing me in any shape or form. I mean, there was some moments. Vince's moment again. Vince had some pretty great moments. So there was a point where he manages to absorb some power in a interesting fashion. That was quite nice. Other than that, there was no epic battle. There was no really cool showing off of powers. It was just Drew seemed to decide that now that it's the last book, let me just shove in as much heroes fighting villains as possible, and it ended up not feeling meaningful in any way. It didn't feel like anything was going to really happen at all, and nothing did. Nobody died. Nobody had some great victory. It was more so just like, let me just throw as many people into this, like grab every possible character from the book series and just jam them into this one point, make them do something random, and then that's it. I just couldn't feel it. I couldn't feel the enemy because he was so... He barely played a part in the whole series. I don't care about him. I get a small bit of him in book 4, but it's too late at that point. There was so much other stuff going on for the other 3 books, and he's so much not a part of it that I didn't care about him as a villain. His reasonings, anything. It's hard to judge. This really much feels like book 1 to me, where book 1, I just felt there was so much there that wasn't properly explained, properly fleshed out, and that there was so much time spent doing things that weren't necessary or interesting, that by the time I got to the end of the book, I just kind of felt empty. And that's how book 4 made me feel. Book 2 got me really excited. I really felt depth to the characters in that book. It really drew me in. Book 3 was all right. It wasn't like as great as book 2, but it was still fun, kept going. Book 4, unlike book 1, to be fair, book 4 made me feel empty more so in that I feel that more time should have been spent just fleshing out more. To me, this could have easily had a 5th book, at least, just so that I could give a shit about the bad people. I just didn't. And I didn't care about most of the heroes either. I didn't care about these random other students coming in. I just wasn't into it. So it's hard to judge. It's really hard to judge. I think the series as a whole is really worth a read. It really is. It's fun. It's got a really slow start at first. And I mean, again, it's preference, right? A lot of this series it's not about heroes per se. I mean, that's the gist of it, but it's really about these young people and them becoming hero, what it takes to be one before you even step out of school. And so that was really, really fascinating. It was a really interesting perspective. It's something that we don't really usually get in series or books or films. We don't really get that time, like huge amount of time spent on teaching someone and expressing to someone in many, many different ways why this is such a serious decision and it's not to be taken lightly, and that there's so much responsibility that goes along with this kind of choice to be something we would call a hero. Unfortunately, I wish we would have more of this perspective for our police officers in real life. Not that I'm going to go on a bash of police officers, because I definitely think they've been bashed a little bit too much, but it definitely would be nice if we actually had a culture out here in reality where we put a lot more seriousness and devoted thought towards the career that is being a police officer. We could take a leaf out of this book series, that's for sure. But I mean, overall, look, if I'm going to say my real feelings towards book 4, I enjoyed it. It was fun. The characters were still fun to listen to, still fun to follow along. I think the overall different story plots that were going along, whether it's the Charles Adair Globe situation tied up with Alice, Vince's attempt to become more than what he was, Roy and Herschel's trying to figure things out within themselves. I think all of these people were super interesting. Nick was very interesting. It just didn't come together in a way that I felt very emotionally attached to. It just, I guess there was too much slice of life kind of fluff going along with it, and it was difficult for me to emotionally really get connected to any of the people. And even though there was some really, really great action at some points, a lot of it was just not well developed enough. I don't really think Drew, at least in this series, is very good at writing action scenes, at least from a point of making us not only emotionally connect to the person who's in the battle, but also just creating interesting large battles at the very least. He did some good job sometimes, like I said, during the intramurals, but overall he's just, to me, he's not that great at writing battle scenes. He's just not. But like I said, it's still enjoyable. I would still recommend this book series to anyone. I think it's worth a read at least once. I think there's some great nuggets inside of this series. Again, I think the major issue is if there had been a little bit less fluff and a little bit more fleshing out of certain things, it would have been really, really great. I've read up on Drew Hayes and his opinions towards this series. He says he might revisit the world one day, but we're definitely not going to get an expansion on these characters and where they go. Obviously, the book ends on a cliffhanger, which kind of shows off that the son of one of our, two of our main characters actually might be responsible for this whole powers war, and he's going to be a central figure. I think there's some pretty cool stuff that might be in the works that might actually change my mind, especially if you just consider the next book that he writes in this world to just be a continuation of the Superpowered series. But overall, I think as a book and as a series that just talks about kids learning to be more, I guess, responsible and turning them into the kind of adults that you want to look at and follow and put into positions where they have to make huge decisions due to their abilities and the abilities of people that they're going against. I think Drew did a fantastic job in this series showcasing that. He just didn't kind of follow through as well as I hoped in the other parts, but it was good enough. It was good enough. I would totally give this book would probably be like a 3.5 on 5 for me. This series as a whole, though, would probably be a 4 on 5. It was still really, really fun to read. It might have dragged at certain parts, but the flow was good. The writing was overall good. The story was interesting, considering it was like so much of a microcosm, pretty much just happening mostly at the HCP. At Lander, it was pretty great. So I'm impressed overall. A little disappointed, but impressed. Now, I'm going to get into some spoiler stuff, which will hopefully allow me to flesh out more of these things and make people happy instead of just being angry at me for not liking the series as much. But maybe you'll understand why. So, there are decisions that Drew made that, quite frankly, I feel he shouldn't have. One of the main ones is I don't think Roy and Herschel should have remained separate entities. I think I don't know, to me, it's interesting to a degree, but it's weird. When they started panicking about merging into one entity, I was actually very excited. I thought it would be an extremely interesting thing to make these two separate personalities that one had obviously been born out of the other's mind. Roy didn't exist until Herschel made him. I think it would have been extremely fascinating to see their two personalities mesh together and have Herschel be that combination of both. I think it also would have made the fact that he's I guess, married and as a kid coming along according to Mary, but at the same time Roy is still gonna take over the body sometimes and go have sex. It's just strange. I can't wrap my mind fully around it. I would have much preferred to see that be a thing where they come together, and that's a whole other aspect where they have to deal with being a whole new person practically merged together, and that with Mary's help would have tied in very, very well with Mary going into this new field of hers where she's going to help supers deal with all these kinds of aspects of their lives. So I think that was a lost chance that Drew should have taken, in my opinion. I think also that Alice, as much as I loved her as a character, I loved her development, I loved her growth, the way he portrays Alice at the end, just dealing with finding her mom and then dealing with the Pendleton brothers, I just, it was so unemotional. I just didn't care. It was strange. Like she just left them to fight. She came back after and helped Sean a little bit, but it was just kind of lame. Like the way that she just basically got her mom and then flew off, and that was kind of the end of it. It's like this whole build up towards getting to her mom, and it ended with her just picking her up and flying away and leaving the two uncles to duke it out. It was just, I just couldn't feel it. I couldn't feel it at all. I couldn't feel anything for Globe's group because obviously I didn't know anybody in Globe's group. We get a little bits and pieces of what had happened to Ray's, what had happened to George, but we spend almost no time with Globe and his group, so we don't really care about them in the slightest. There's no time spent with them. There's little bits of talk here and there. That's not enough to build emotional connection to any characters. Already in a series that has so many characters, if you're not going to spend some time there, don't expect me to give a shit. It's not going to happen. Same with George and Adam's story kind of ending with you not knowing if he actually killed George or not. There's kind of an implication, but that's just a messed up ending. All this stuff about heroes trying to clean up their act and get everything together, and you're going to let this kid murder another guy just because he made a mistake? He didn't murder Adam's family. He accidentally, during a battle, miscalculated and caused the deaths of people. It's horrible. It's not something you literally cold-blooded execute someone for, and it was completely off with the rest of how Globe was running things. It's not acceptable in the slightest. Doesn't make any sense whatsoever. It would have been much nicer to at least have you see George or Adam after having not killed him. But you're kind of left hanging, and still the fact that George is missing, the implication is sorted there. So that was very, very strange. I didn't really like that decision whatsoever. I think Adam's character also should have been built up more so that we really could understand his motivations. Again, this is all about having spent more time with Globe's group and gotten to know them more and understand where they're all coming from. Instead, you don't. You really don't. I don't even know where else to go with this. I don't know. I just feel that decisions were made in terms of characters doing things that didn't really make much sense with the overall arc of their characters. And I maybe Titan, for example. Titan suddenly being a big part of the series. I understand it's because of core piece, but more time was spent with Titan in some ways compared to almost anyone else. Like you actually spent a huge amount of time with Titan comparatively. That's how little we spend with some other characters. And so why did I get to know Titan so much? People could argue and say, well, it's because he's Roy and Herschel's father. You need to understand where he's coming from. Okay, but there was other characters that were just as important, if not more important. We should have spent a lot more time with them. I don't know. I feel like I can keep ranting about this for a long time, but overall, again, I enjoyed the series. I liked everything, even though Drew didn't make certain decisions that I felt would have improved upon character development and the series as a whole. I think he still did a good enough job that this series is worth a 4 on 5. Like I said, I guess I'm kind of just down. That's what I feel like. I just finished off the last like 5% of the book this morning, and I kind of feel down. I feel like there should have just been more, and I'm just kind of left hanging right now, going, It's not evoking the feeling I was hoping it would evoke. I didn't have the finalization that I hoped I would. I don't feel complete, people. I don't feel complete, and I'm sad. So I'm gonna leave it at that. This is probably not my most excitable review, but I don't know. I'm torn. I'm torn on this. I'll read Corpy's eventually. I actually haven't read it. I'll read Corpy's eventually and give you guys a review on that also. But overall, I'm feeling kind of blah about this. Even though, again, 4 and 5, but I'm not there. Sorry. Wish I could give you guys more. So, enjoy yourselves. Let me know what you think down below. Like, comment, subscribe. Check out the website, geektails.ca. I actually moved over my website to a new site. So basically, I'm off on Substack now. I have kept the same name, although it hasn't fully propagated across the whole web yet. So like if you write www.geektales.ca, you'll always find it. But if you write geektales.ca, because of like a forwarding DNS record thing, it's like propagated in some places but not others. So I can like see it on Internet Explorer on my desktop but not on Brave. I can see it on Brave on my phone, but it's a little bit strange. I've never fully understood DNS records and how the internet works. It's not really my forte, but it seems to be coming along. Hopefully by the end of the day that will be all done and you can visit Geek Tales writing it however you want. Thanks. Have yourself a great day.